The beef production in our area of Australia is a temperate region with a Mediterranean climate. Very different from Paraguay, as you'll see in the slide in a minute. Domestic consumption of beef in Australia accounts for only 40% of our production. Therefore, we have to export 60% of what we produce. It's very important that we maintain our export markets because without them, we'd be in trouble. The top, Australia exports to about 100 different countries. Now, my colleague Andrew McCallum said it's 79 at the moment, and if my figures vary from his, please believe him and not me. I'm a producer, not an expert on trade like Andrew. The top 5 markets, Japan, which is Australia's biggest and most valuable market, buying a total of 300,000 tonnes, which includes more than half of the grain-fed beef exported from Australia. The United States of America buys 234,000 tonnes, 97% being grass beef and 7% of that is manufacturing beef, mainly lean beef that we mix with their trimmings for hamburgers. Korea buys 160,000 tonnes, which 77% is frozen, and China, up until recently, bought 133,000 tonnes, 94% frozen, 75% grass-fed, and 25% grain-fed. But in the last few months, China's been buying increased volumes of Australian beef and is now Australia's biggest customer. What I'm showing you here is where Paraguay sits in comparison to Australia. That's about the size of Paraguay in comparison to Australia. It sits in subtropical Queensland, the same latitude as subtropical Queensland. Our properties are down in the southeast tip, South Australia and Western Victoria. A very different climate and soil to Paraguay, therefore we've got different production systems. Some of the production systems might be transferable, but not all of them. The Ogilvie Group of properties is situated in the 600 to 750 millimetre rainfall area in southeast South Australia and Western Victoria. And the red circles are where our properties are situated. I live here on the coast, Kingston. My brother Noel lives here in Narraport. His son Jane lives here. His son Duncan lives here. Our feedlot is over here in Victoria, and it's close to the grain producing areas to the north of this area. The Ogilvie Group is a family business consisting of 4 family directors and 10 employees. The business has been developed and expanded over 3 generations to the cattle finishing and breeding enterprise that it is today. Over time, as more land suitable for growing and finishing cattle is purchased, the breeding component of the business has diminished as a percentage of the total herd. The purchase of weaned cattle from the major breeding areas of eastern Australia has become the largest source of young cattle for our production system. The vision of the business was to produce and sell high quality finished cattle to the Australian domestic supermarket trade. Supermarkets prefer to deal with suppliers who can deliver cattle every week of the year in large numbers that consistently meet their specifications. We have achieved that goal by developing 3 production strategies within our system. The first production strategy, which has been used historically, is still the most common in our area, and is grass finishing cattle on a perennial pasture which consists of plant species, including clovers, legumes, ryegrass, phalaris, tall wheatgrass, and its suitable areas, loose or alfalfa. 100 kilograms per hectare of single superphosphate is applied every year to maintain the quality of the pasture, as the soils in our region are deficient in phosphorus. No native grasses in our area have enough nutrition for finishing cattle. Most of the 600 to 750 millimetres of rain we receive from mid-April to October falls in that time span, with very little useful rain falling in the remaining months. With this, we can maintain a stocking rate of 1 cow and calf unit per hectare, or 2 growing young cattle per hectare. A pasture will grow all year, but only has enough quality to finish cattle for 4 months of the year, September to early January. This is typical of a planted perennial pasture in early spring. It's very dominant with legumes, the legume dominance. As spring progresses into early summer, the grasses become more pronounced and the legumes disappear. The legumes are what gives us the boost to spring production to grow our cattle. These are grass-finished cattle which we weigh towards the end of August to grade into various weight categories. You can see they're not finished at this stage. This is the same cattle, probably 3 weeks later. They're finished on that high nutritional legume pasture with a live weight of around about 570 kilos. And these cattle are ready to load for Woolworths supermarket. The cattle are delivered to the slaughterhouse, consigned to the supermarket. The supermarket has a contract with the slaughterhouse to process our cattle on their behalf. We are paid by the supermarket at an agreed price as a hot stand carcass weight, which is the Australian industry standard. We ship our cattle that weight out in loads of 75 on B-double trucks, double-decker B-double trucks. Ogilvie Group owns 3 sets of these trailers. We made the decision to buy them because the standard of trailers that were being used to ship our cattle wasn't to our expectations. Now we've got dedicated cattle crates, and we know the cattle are going to be delivered in good condition. The second strategy we've developed to finish cattle on is to finish cattle on summer crops, consisting of a mixture of millet, fodder rate, chicory or alfalfa grown under 14 centipede irrigators. There is an abundant supply of underground water at all the pivot sites, which are pumped from an aquifer at 30 metres or from an artesian aquifer at a depth of 200 metres, which delivers water to the surface at about 125 metres a second. The 25 hectare pivots are fenced into 2 sections, so that the 75 cattle on them can be rotated every few days. As the rain-fed pasture declines in quality, grower cattle from the rain-fed grass system are selected by weight and moved on to the pivots to ensure a continuous supply of quality cattle. This is a recently constructed artesian well, free-flowing at 125 litres a second. In due course, we'll pipe that to the motor to pump the pivot. This is an example of steers finishing on a pivot pasture. These were from last year because we haven't started yet finishing cattle this year. They are moved on to the pivot pasture at about sort of 480 to 520 kilos, or even heavier, depending on whether we're selling them to the supermarket or JBS. and we just put a final polish on them on the pivot. This is an example of a pivot pasture. We've got millet, which is that plant there. We've got chicory, which is the flat plant there. And can't see there's a little bit of fodder right there, but they eat that first as preference to anything else. So it's not up at the moment. This is the machine that we use to seed the pivots. The last week in September, the pivots are prepared for seeding, and then we seed some of them with this machine, and some of them are seeded by contract pivot seeders with these more complex and very expensive machines. But we haven't got enough equipment to do the whole lot, so we contract out. Our third production system is our early feedlot. It's a small 3,000 head capacity feedlot which supplies cattle from late summer to the start of grass feed production in September. Now, none of our grass has got enough nutritional value during the winter period to finish cattle, so we built the feedlot to do that. The cattle moved to the feedlot from our backgrounding properties when they weigh around 400 to 420 kilos live weight. And we've found that cattle that are grown on our properties for several weeks or months become acclimatised to our region and have fewer health issues when put on feed. If we buy cattle straight out of the auctions and put them in the feedlot, we found that there are lots of health issues. The feedlot is scales with an electronic NLS tag scanner connected to the scale monitor. As the cattle are weighed on induction, the electronic tag is automatically matched to the weight. When the cattle are again weighed on dispatch, the weight gain and other details are displayed on the monitor, which enables us to keep a really close look at the weight gained by the cattle and how they're going as far as productivity. The cattle are kept in groups of 100 to 65 days in feedlot pens which are 30 metres wide and 50 metres long. During this time, they can eat at will from covered bins, a ration consisting of 8 hay, rolled barley, lupins, which is a legume, and a small amount of canola oil to keep the dust in the ration settled, and a pellet which has got all the minerals and a root modifier in it. The grain in the ration has increased and the hay decreased over a period of 2 to 3 weeks to allow the cattle to adjust to the high energy diet of 12.25 megajoules of energy per kilogram of feed, 14% crude protein and 26% non-digestible fibre. Now to you feedlots, this probably sounds like a very hot ration, and it is, but because we only feed for a short period of time, the cattle will thrive on it. They will consistently gain an average of 2.2 kilos a day over these 65 days on this ration. Give them an exit weight of around about 540 to 560 kilos live weight. The 65 days on feed finishes the cattle to supermarket specifications and allows us 3 rotations through the feedlot. Now these aren't classed as grain finished cattle, they're just finished cattle. We need 75 to 90 days for a grain finished product. The feedlot is unique in the fact that the cattle are not fed daily, but have a constant access to feed from bins that only need to be filled twice a week. This reduces the number of employees we need to run the feedlot to 4. Here's an example of some cattle that have been on feed possibly for 2 to 3 weeks. You'll notice they have a tag in this pen, has a yellow tag, that's visual identification. this hen has an orange tag. It's part of the rules for Australian feedlots. You must have a visual identifier as well as the NLIS device, which is in the other room. These are cattle first week on feed. You can see they're pretty rough and hairy. And if you look at the ration, a very high percentage of hay. You have to get the cattle started eating the ration, and they'll eat the hay. If they get too much grain for a start, it has acidosis, and then they just don't thrive in the feedlot. You can see there, each pen has 2 8-metre self-feeders, which gives 16 metres of feed space for the 100 cattle. These are the self-feeding bins with the roof. They have a swivel roof on them, which opens. You can see they swivel there. We can open the roof and then drive along the feed lane at the back and fill the bins. We only need to do this twice a week, which reduces the amount of labour considerably. And in a climate where we get winter rainfall, if you feed in an open bunk system and the feed gets wet, they won't eat it. You've got to shovel it out and waste a lot of feed. This is the end result. Feedlot finished, 65 days, and this particular one right here, 600 kilos, which is starting to get to the upper end of your domestic weight. We don't want them much bigger than that, although we'll get penalised for overweight. I asked the boys at the feedlot to send me a picture of our scales so that I could explain the data collection on it. And what did they do? They sent a picture of the scale with 690 kilo animal, which is not ideal because it's outside of the weight range and will get penalised for having an overweight animal there. So what the scale tells us, that animal gained 4.3 kilos a day. Now every now and then you're going to get one that does that. There's nothing you can do about it, and he's guaranteed to just go out of the system. He's been on feed for 61 days. He's the 8th animal through. That's the electronic ID chip in the tag. That's the visual tag, that yellow or orange tag that I showed you, which gives us a pen number. This is the second rotation. Pen number's 29, and that 13 there refers to another condition that we monitor. They came from one of our backgrounding properties, which is called Glen Bowl, so we know from traceability, we know where the animal came from. We know its pen number, we know the tag's light pink, we know it's a heifer. So with those scales and the electronic chip, we can collect all sorts of useful information that we can monitor to send to our nutritionists so that we can keep our ration well balanced and collect data that's useful for future reference. I'll now talk a little bit about the cattle management and overfeed group, which allows us to manage around about 25,000 cattle and a feedlot with 4 directors who are hands-on directors. We don't just sit around in the office, we actually work with the business, and 10 other people. We muster our cattle with a team of 3 people, usually 2 on 4-wheel motorbikes, 1 on a Toyota Hilux, and a pickup. And the person in the Toyota pickup is me. Sometimes I'm old, but he does ride motorbikes. I don't. Too old to ride motorbikes. The cattle yards are designed based on cattle behaviour, which reduces the stress on the cattle, improves outcomes for cattle, safety and people handling them. We get professional buyers to buy our cattle, and the buyers live in the areas of Eastern Australia where most of the cattle are born. They buy cattle nearly every week, and they move into the paddocks as the cattle that are sold will move into the feedlot, leave the paddock. So we move cattle in every week, we move cattle out every week. In our system, we have to have a continuous supply of cattle. Otherwise, the system starts to break down. Woolworths supermarket rings up and says, "Why haven't you got cattle this week?" And if you say, "Well, we sort of couldn't manage our flow," they'll find someone else that can. We also employ contractors to do fencing and haymaking and other jobs that need specialised equipment, because there's not much point in having very expensive machinery sitting in a shed and using it 2 weeks a year. This is an example of our stock management calendar that we employ on our breeding properties. It's seasonally orientated. So the dry months are January, February, March. May start raining in April, but usually May. The wet months are May, June, July, August, September. And we hope October, but it's not always wet in October. And then it starts to dry out in November and December and through again. So the heifers start calving in January. We always make them a little bit early to give them more time to recover for their second calf. And in February, the mature cows start calving. So we drench heifers because we have a parasite problem. In cool climate, we have worms, and also we have lice. No tick, it's too cold for tick. In April the 9th, we join our heifers for 7 weeks with 4 bulls to the 100. Now the reason we join them for 7 weeks is 2 cycles, because we want to get the maximum amount of fertility out of the breeding herd. If they don't get pregnant in 2 cycles, they're gone. They don't get a second chance. The cows, the mature cows, are joined for 10 weeks, which gives them 10 cycles. 4 bulls to the 100 the same. We vaccinate the heifers with 5-in-1 vaccine, which treats pulpy kidney and other problems that cattle will get on a high length of pasture. We treat for lice this time of the year, and then we start to mark and vaccinate our calves. It takes us around about 6 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks to process all of our calves. At the end of that process, any cow that hasn't got a calf is sold. It's cut. Doesn't matter what age it is, it's gone. Remove the bulls and the cows there. We vaccinate our calves twice to give them the maximum amount of protection with the vaccine. There are no cattle for the reasons of health and withholding periods with drench. There are no cattle drenched after this date, which gives us a good 6-week to 7-week lead up before we start selling cattle. End of August, September, we start weighing our cattle into weight ranges, and then we start selling cattle off the grass. End of September, October, November, and then we start weaning our calves, because the calves go in behind the cattle that's sold. So the previous year's calves are sold at 2 years old. The new calves go into the paddocks behind them. So as I said, the cattle on the breeding properties are managed on a very strict schedule as listed by that calendar. The heifers having their first calf start calving at 2 years of age in the first week of January. Mature cows start calving in February. On April the 9th, we used low birth weight bulls to put over the heifers so that we reduce the amount of dystonia and calving problems. That's just reinforces what I said. So our cows without calves, that's ones that don't calve, are usually about 10%. So we get 90% live calves at market on the ground. The heifers are selected and they're joined at 12 to 14 months of age. So they're selected on weight, on body shape, they have to have good feed, good temperament, anything that you really need in a breeding animal, which we expect will stay in the herd for possibly 9 years, or maybe even 10 some. The only reason they'll be culled from the herd is if they don't have a calf, or they start to get slow or other problems. All of our cattle yards on our breeding properties and some of our other properties are built to the same design. They're steel panel yards screwed to wooden posts. The reason we use steel panels is because we can roll them on a curve and we can have a curved race, a curved yard, which really improves cattle flow. This is the calf marking complex. When we mark the calves, they're separated from the cows and they're run through this complex. I've got a slide a little bit further on that shows how that works. The most important thing about these yards is other than the person pushing them up, nobody else is working in with the cattle. They're all out away from the cattle so that there's no danger of stress or injury. That's the calf at the front of the calf making race, caught in that calf cradle. So you don't have to rope them and jump on them or hold them down. That's all done by that restraint. And the race behind, we have 2 calves, and this continuous supply of calves, we can handle around about 70 calves an hour marking the vaccine in this system with 3 people. These are NLIS devices. Most of you have seen them. I've seen them on cattle here. In Australia, every animal must have an electronic tag in its ear before it leaves its property of birth. We have white tags, which are the property of birth tags. We have orange tags, which means that the animal has lost it's a purchased animal which has lost its property of birth tag at some stage, and that orange tag signifies it's lost its lifetime traceability. But it needs an electronic tag in its ear, so we put in an orange tag. Every property has a property code. Every property in Australia that runs cattle must have a property code. This is the property code for our breeding property, SA 200133. At the end of August, in the grass-fed system, all the cattle are weighed into 4 weight groups. This eliminates the need to be continually handling cattle, trying to drag your weight range you need out of the line. Cattle over 600 kilograms, which are too heavy for the supermarkets, are suitable for the JBS grass-finished, certified grass-finished market. The JBS grass-finished specifications provides a really important market for us for those heavy cattle that grow rapidly and exceed supermarket top weight. JBS, of course, feeds the international demand in the US other places for a quality grass rich beef product. The cattle that are 480, 600 kilos are ready for the supermarket within 2 weeks. They're put into groups at 75 per paddock, which is a truckload, and this makes husbanding and consigning easy because we just go and grab a paddock, we've got 75, put them on the truck, they're all settled down as a group, and they meet our MSA, one of our MSA expectations. The cattle are 400 to 480 kilos will gain weight rapidly from mid-September to October on that pasture that I showed you before, and we know that they'll consistently gain up to 1.5 kilos a day during that period. Cattle under 400 kilograms weight will be ready for sale in December. Some of them may not have enough fat cover, and they'll go into the pivots in early January or February to be finished on the pivots. The National Vendor Declaration for Cattle is the underpinning document for our health system. The NLAS tag is an individual animal ID. Every group of animals that are sold, whether it's to a slaughterhouse or to another producer, must be accompanied by one of these documents. It's got the property identification code. This is one of our properties where we finish cattle and don't breed cattle there. It's got the number, what they are, who they're consigned to, Woolworths, the slaughterhouse, which is Tees at Marrickville. It's got the number of ear tags, the number of rumour devices. Our rumour devices were brought out originally with the idea that you put them in and nobody can cut the tag out and steal the animal. The only problem is slaughterhouses hate them, so nobody uses them anymore. Down this side, we've got a series of questions which define the health and status of the animal. So we've got, have they been treated with a growth hormone? No. Have they ever been fed animal fats? It's not legal to feed animal fat in Australia, so you tick no. Has the owner owned these cattle since birth? No, because these cattle have been purchased from the eastern states, moved to this property. How long ago? More than 12 months. That may not be true, but it's probably 6 to 12 months. In the past 60 days, have any of these cattle been fed by-product stock feeds? So by-product stock feeds like cotton trash or bean trash or something like that. So no. If you tick yes for any of these next questions, you've got a lot of explaining to do. In the past 6 months, these animals have been on a listed ERP database because of chemical residues. Some sugarcane properties, some cotton properties have got restrictions on them because of the type of chemicals they use, which can end up in the meat of cattle. Our international markets have got no tolerance for that. Are any of the cattle in withholding period for export slaughter? So if we drench cattle with ivermectin, we've got an export slaughter interval usually around 42 days. You have to make sure you don't send cattle off that have been treated before the slaughter intervals been finished. Consume material that's still within a holding with period when harvest or collected or first raised. So if somebody sprays a crop and then cuts it for hay and it's been sprayed with a chemical to kill something, you've got to make sure that that's you cattle don't eat it. In the past 42 days, where any of the cattle grazed in spray risk area or areas that risk of spray occurred. This applies to properties next to cotton growing areas or sugarcane crops that are sprayed with some chemicals that hang about in cattle. And then, this is a statutory declaration. I sign this, and if any of these things are untrue, and they find chemical in the cattle, I'm in big trouble. I've made a statutory declaration that everything I've said is true. Some states of Australia, they fill this out, we don't need to. The next part of the consignment is the MSA Meat Standards Australia Declaration. This underpins the eating quality of the product. We have a list of things that we need to comply with to become MSA registered producers. All sorts of various things. You shouldn't box, so 14 days, cattle should not be boxed together less than 4, or added, new cattle added to a group for less than 14 days before they're consigned. This has been really well-proven science. If you get a group of cattle and mix them together, it takes 14 days for them to settle down and become a new herd or a new group. And that can affect the pH of meat especially. So here we have who we are, the property, our MSA registration number for that property, the date of dispatch, the time of dispatch, the property code, the number, whether they're Hereford or Angus, because the more tropical beef content you get, the less eating quality of the meat. And these here, have they been treated with growth hormone? No. Are they milk-fed veals? That's calves straight from their mothers? No. And has it been sold through an MSA accredited sale yard? I don't know of any MSA accredited sale yards in our area. So this is the NPD, because there'll be a national vendor declaration that goes with this. That's it there. This is a grid. Every processor issues grids. So this is a pricing grid. This is the target right here. Everything here is discounts for not meeting that target. And you can see some of them are pretty hefty. 80 cents a kilogram discount there. If you've got an ungraded carcass. If it's 315 kilos, which is over the specified weight. And this is the specifications here that Woolworths, preference given to Boss Taurus cattle. YG, they're ciphers for young steers or young heifers. Bruising damage is deducted. The meat colour, plus in 1B or 3, you need a chart to all this. The pH has to be 5.7 or greater. Fat colour 0 to 3, rib fat 3 to 10. Average weight, pH fat, P8 fat, 5 to 80 millimetres. And there's this steers 70 days on grain feed, heifers 60 days. And there's their deductions. Less than 3 mils rib fat, you lose 60 cents. Non-compliant fat distribution, you lose 60 cents. Non-compliant index score, that's your, this score here, 60 cents. Meat colour, 60 cents. Any cattle with 6 teeth or ungraded, $2. So you don't want to be sending cattle with too many teeth. And this is what we get back when the cattle are slaughtered. Every slaughterhouse will upload to a database, which is the MSA database, we can access this information by using our code to get the kill details of our cattle. So here we go, we've got body number, that's what the Meatworks the slaughterhouse uses. We've got the RFID, which is the chip. We've got the NLIS number, which is that outside number or the tag, so they match. Milk feed dealer, no. Sale yard, compliant MSA, no. HGP, no, these weren't treated. They didn't rinse them. They hang them by the Achilles tendon. The sex there, you've got males and females. The hot standard carcass weight, down this column. Tropical breed content. Hump, which is an indication of tropical breed content. Ossification, which they use rather than teeth. The MSA marbling, which is a different score to the Osmeat marbling. Meat colour, fat colour, rib fat, the eye muscle area, and the pH. Temperature, that's all that sort of thing. This is the MSA index down this side. The higher the index, the better the egg quality. This is where, if we're going to get one fall out of MSA, this is where it will happen, right here. There's influence on pH, it can be on the farm, it can be on the truck, or it can be in the lairage of the slaughterhouse. The producer wears it, doesn't matter where it is. The slaughterhouse takes absolutely no responsibility for the way they treat cattle when you drop them off the slaughterhouse, which is a sore point for some people. The directors of Ogilvie Group have built the business on the premise that continuous improvement requires measurement, analysis, and action. Goes absolutely nowhere if you don't act upon your measurements, your analysis. Thank you very much for the invitation to present at your conference.